Hmm. Do I have any more questions? I mean, I had more questions about Muncie huts and expedited shipping, but that sort of got answered by what the fuck happened to Marcus.
Kept there within a secured and secreted location as a snack. And that's what would have happened to the coterie. That's what would have happened to David and Marcus had Byron not saved them. They would have been taken to the freezer, and there would have been no second chances. They would have been devoured.
Eventually. Yeah, fair enough.
You have any more questions, Sean?
The only thing I can think of is, did you draw up a lot of stuff with Penelope, or did we see most of it, like characterization history or anything like that?
Of course, I had designed, her along with all those other little girls. There was a killer involved who I directed you all to. He was in Sing Sing. That you guys saw her and her characterizations and her personality and how that ended up being. She was a little girl when she died. At the time of her death, she was 5 years old. And she just had... Let's see, I had her death slated in 63, 98. She had 45 years to ruminate on what that death meant and everything else while being bound to the Majestic building. So, wasn't really a little girl.
Alright, I've kind of got a question. Was there anything that you wish that we had interacted with as players that we never really did?
Answer then, no. There is nothing that I wish you guys had interacted with more. I don't, at least I never developed that attitude for this campaign, Aaron.
Alright, I was just wondering if there was something, really cool that you had thought of that you were disappointed you never got to show off.
Nah. It's, I'm an individual who can be entertained by keeping the really cool things in my head. I had rolled up lots of different events to happen within the New York City metropolitan area. Whether you guys interacted with them or not, I didn't much care. Like the maps and stuff. Like, you guys never really explored Dragon Metro Cab Company? I don't have a problem with that. Because I didn't exactly, wanted to be revealed that I had made Tom Danzig a werewolf, because I didn't know how I felt about it. I decided to do it, and once I did, I was kind of like, well, I mean, I think it makes sense. I think I can make this work. It just seems weird. Whatever. If they'll never explore that, they're not that fucking crazy. They'll be distracted with so much other shit. No matter what Sean tries to do, they're gonna be distracted.
It's true.
There's opportunity.
Every
That's right. I just had it so that opportunity could be anywhere within this vast, vast setting, despite the fact that it was limited to a city, or rather, we actually went outside of New York City itself to go to Ardsley. We were still within the same general area, but this is a fucking huge area. So goddamn big. I can't process. I know I've spent at least 3 to 4 hours for every 1 hour we've spent on a session, just trying to construct this all together. Because, a city so vast like this, even though it exists, it's not a place that I've been to, and then I'm trying to wrap it within the constraints of being tainted and tilted by the world of darkness. And then the player characters at the start are more fucking powerful than starting characters in Warhammer, fantasy roleplay, or Warhammer 40k, or Dungeons and Dragons, or shit like that. Because as vampires, you have capabilities that White Wolf itself doesn't even know how to process. They're like, just make it up.
I don't know if we could take a bolter to the face very well.
Yeah. It'd only be lethal damage.
I don't know. Those kind of fire rockets.
I'm sure, 40th Millennium vampires have figured out a way to handle bolters. The 41st Millennium guys.
What? No. They're forces of chaos at that point.
Yeah. Chaos knows how to deal with bolters. They corrupt the people who fire the bolters.
That does sound like a vampire.
There you go. Are there any other questions the four of you have that only I, as the storyteller, could answer for you? That you want to ask?
I'm sure there are, but I'm having a hard time thinking of more.
Same here.
Now, I did tell you guys to spend this past week, jotting these down and constructing them. I wanted you all to think about this. This is part of your homework assignment.
Right, but I thought up a whole bunch more just looking at the icons on the map. Being reminded of stuff.
Now, Aaron, were you going to ask about Vargas or not?
Oh, yeah. Was it just art attack?
No.
Okay.
That it is not something that I would have done in that instance. Although I could have. Mikhail Vargas was an old man. It's certainly possible that he could have died like that. But it's not something that I wanted to have happen. The initial determination for me deciding that Mikhail Vargas was going to be poisoned was an instance of... it goes back to how strong and stalwart and sturdy your domain has been, and how protective it is, and how useful it's been compared to, what a loner kindred would have. I mean, it's so easy to hunt in Astoria. You guys have not had to worry about maintaining a herd. Your hunting rolls have always been low there. Very useful and protective, even for Byron, who has limiting factors, and even for David, who, as a Nosferatu, has a difficult time hunting. The only person who's had to maintain a herd was an individual who didn't live in Astoria. And it also helped that, he wouldn't want to be outside hunting and him go fucking crazy.
But as a side note, he could have very easily hunted if he'd been there. Just, the risk of crazy.
Yeah, outside crazy. Certainly. So in that instance, I wanted to throw a monkey wrench, if you will, and threaten domain security and stability and see what happens. And so I made some rolls, and I decided, Mikhail Vargas didn't have a high hope of surviving. Mikhail Vargas ended up getting poisoned. And it wasn't for something a standard talk screen would have covered for. Rather, it's something that goes by many names, but it's also known as Wolfsbane, a sort of the lady killer poison that can be put into liquid beverages, and which would end up resulting in a death that a normal talk screen would not pick up. A talk screen would have indicated it if it had been like a complete general or broad one, but in sort of like the diminished resources and the stressed law enforcement, the corrupt agencies, it's kind of not something that was looked for. And as a result, Vargas ended up getting poisoned, and it's something that could have been found. It's just, not something that ever did get found. As for who ended up poisoning him, I will actually keep that one a secret and just say that it was someone with a clear and decided interest in destabilizing the coterie by removing the primary, source of their domain security.
That describes like half the city.
Yeah, I don't have anything. Like, literally anyone here.
I didn't want it to be a heart attack thing, because I thought that would be I guess, sort of rude in that aspect. Even if you would have been fine with that on sort of like a player aspect, Aaron, I like to give the players the opportunity to find out these things, and if they pursue that angle, investigate and exact retribution or vengeance upon it. It'd be like if I stole something that was awesome and powerful to you guys, if we're playing a D&D game, like some sort of treasure, like, oh, you tripped over a rock, and then your mighty longsword +3 fell into a crevice. But you never noticed. You'd be like, what the fuck? Oh no, you can't go down there and retrieve it. It's gone. Now, yes, it's gone. Instead, I wanted to give you all the opportunity, if you so chose to pursue it, if that was a thing. You guys are just so busy, and, there's just so many other things happening that you could have pursued that angle. And at the end, you would have found an individual, a spiteful individual, who wanted to see the coterie harm and destabilize them.
Was it Pistol Guy?
I'm not allowed to say.
Okay. Probably didn't help that Marcus was helping David look into this instance. It's gotta be this thing.
I mean, you guys did do an investigation of Vargas's apartment, and if I recall, with your combined roles, neither of you did that well, and so it's kind of like you just found the usual stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of them failed outright, and the other one got 1 success or something like that.
I really can't think of any more questions. I don't know about the rest of everyone else, though.
No, I can't think of anything in particular.
Yeah, there's all sorts of fringe information that I could ask, but I don't know, nothing. I mean, it'd be like about the rival gangsters, the Fratellis, and there was that other one where they came in and that type of stuff. But you get into stuff that we didn't really hit on that much.
Yeah, Gaspucci's. I mean, it's perfectly fine that this is information you guys never much looked into. Like, the Fratellis obviously did make inroads into Queens, along with the Gaspucci family obviously making inroads into Queens. And there's all sorts of drama and strife happening, criminally, as there's wont to be. They just, the Fratellis were the closest ones who'd impact Astoria, and they sort of shied away from Astoria. As it turns out, it's kind of a problematic area.
David would have really liked to have been interacted with that more. If he wasn't so goddamn busy.
Well, maybe David should not have gone to Torpor.
Well, when you put it that fucking way.
Yeah, that was a really poor decision on your part, Aaron. I mean, why did you decide to go into Torpor for, what was it, 8 game sessions?
I mean, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Back when I was getting my head blown off.
Right.
Your fringe questions you might ask, I mean, I do have a lot of stuff fleshed out and roles that I made behind the scenes, but there's also a lot of stuff that I just come up with spur of the moment and ad lib. So if you guys ever decide to do something or, have an angle of investigation you want to pursue during the games, I'm like, well, okay, let's roll with that. And I come with all the stuff on the fly. Sort of like the Dominic Gressman situation. I knew the Anarchs were, of course, making inroads in the Queens, but I didn't have exact names for those characters until we had a situation where you guys wanted to go to a deputy commissioner. And then we decided it. And we went from there.
Yeah, I kind of figured that was how you did it a lot of the time.
Didn't exist until after David fell into torpor. Dominic Gressman and his sort of attributes and characteristics and his obsession with fitness and, health guru type shit didn't exist until you guys asked for it. Edward, potential avenue, a ghoul that Byron could have in City Hall, all sorts of other things.
Oh, yeah, and that was hilarious. It was kind of it should have been expected, but dirty trick making him already a ghoul for Gavin. I mean, like I said, I should have seen it coming, but I didn't.
I thought about it, and I was kind of like, yeah, you know what, it'd be cool. Let's go ahead and have, Byron interact with a Vintru who would not be normally disposed to him. And, of course, Byron's approach, I thought, was enough to warrant an even colder response. And we just went from there. I could have made him a normal human being, in which case, Byron would have easily had a victory. He'll easily have that victory during the epilogue. I just thought it'd be more interesting to throw in a bit of flavor and have other character interaction.
Oh, but and it totally makes sense in retrospect for me that City Hall, if you're just doing stuff in Astoria, other vampires probably wouldn't care too much. Maybe the Anarchs, but nobody else. But if you go into City Hall, that's kind of a big deal trademark. So a lot of vampires have their hands in that pot.
To have a human mortal who would actually throw Byron for a curve by resisting a presence power.
Yeah, that was definitely a what the fuck moment for me. I didn't know what was going on with that.
Any other storyteller questions you guys can ask me before we hang up and disperse? You feel free to ask them. For that moment, though, I want to shift the conversation now to a sort of out-of-character discussion about the game in general, and I'll go first on this affair. I initially organized this game back in February out of a growing interest, just sort of randomly it popped up, in this system, Vampire the Masquerade. I'd sampled it before, back in my teenage years, back whenever my high school friends were just trying a variety of different systems, but beyond that and the games, VtM Redemption and VtM Bloodlines, which I didn't like as much, but it's definitely more open. For whatever reason, the goddamn love story between Kristoff and Aneska and the bad voice acting appealed to me. Aneska! Kristoff! Anyway, I just wanted to try the system and see how it went. I always had not always, that's not exactly the proper terminology. I had an interest in the meta plot, the whole sort of goth punk feel of Gehenna and the world coming to an end and all this crazy shit happening at once. And I wanted to play with the scene, regardless of what I heard about this rule set, and see where the road took me. Initially, I had my doubts about whether I would like the system because of how it's tailored and designed. It's an ad-lib, freeform, vague sort of system by which a bunch of people pretend to be awesome vampires. And vampires are awesome, and they're cool. And they're also, tragic characters. You know, most of them didn't ask for this. They're survivors. They're struggling to cope with, you know, all of these changes and the humanity around them. And, you know, some of the detail and flavor put into the game is try to connect with each of these characters on an emotional level, such as, you know, every time they feed and the internal morality struggle, which to an extent we glossed over and replaced with other things that mattered to the characters, because I didn't want to focus too much on everything the book had. Certainly the rule system proved to be frustrating and irritating and agonizing. It definitely does not lend itself well. It's not a tactical game. You don't fight in VtM. And that makes sense because vampires, being selfish survivors, inherently don't want to fight, or they want to stack the deck in their favor as much as possible. You know, we did so little combat, and that's perfectly okay. You know, I've even had a few people tell me that this has been a more, like, character interactive shit with more combat in it than other campaigns. And mainly because we've had this tactical map here. But you go to look at the White Wolf's rule set for VtM for so many things, and it doesn't exist. They're like, make it up. Or like, I want the rules for this, and I can't find them. That happened a lot with this rule system. And there ended up lying my biggest weakness. I don't like to be the game master of a rule system that I don't know. Because of how many nuances, there's no experience with that. I don't know how to adjudicate things. I don't know how to arbitrate them. I don't know how to make rulings on them because I don't know what's right. I'd rather be a player first, at least to catch a glimpse of what the system is. So in that instance, because I had no basis on which to rule things, I threw my own fucking self into the goddamn ocean of Vampire the Masquerade, and I was confused as hell. Even now, after 24 sessions, and we're on our epilogue, and all the talking that I did with you guys, and I wanted people who were somewhat familiar with Vampire the Masquerade, so that I wouldn't be alone. I didn't want newbies to role-playing. I needed people who could help carry me, just as I could help carry you guys. Because I'm looking at the fucking rulebook, and I'm like, fuck you. You know, I'm looking at extra supplements, and I'm like, whoop-de-fucking-doo. It's like, and I think I've developed the opinion that many longtime veterans who love the crunchy meta plot of the game, but hated the fact that there wasn't a toolbox and went to the new style of Vampire the Masquerade. It just, you feel so fucking lost and confused. You have to make arbitrary, vague rules on anything when you want specifics. I'm cool with ad-libbing. I can't ad-lib all the time. And there were times where I felt that I made the wrong decision. I just didn't have any backup on that. We'll go for an example that I ended up retconning. What time do vampires wake up at night? I know it's based off of humanity. I don't know whether it should be 15 minutes. I don't know whether it should be 30 minutes. I don't know whether it should be an hour. I was fucking lost. I still am lost. I don't know which is right. I went with a half hour. I don't know whether that's good and it should be an hour. I don't know whether it should be 15 minutes. I don't know whether it should be 45 minutes. It fucking pissed me off. Training times for disciplines. And skills and attributes. Make it up. Like, can't you give me like some sort of... what? This fucking system has existed for 20 years. How have you people gotten anything done? Of course, I suppose with live-action roleplays consisting of 100 people, they don't have to worry about this minutiae. They worry about other things. The feel, the goth punk environment.
Rock, paper, scissors.
Rock, paper, scissors. I'm like, how the fuck does X do Y before Z kills him? And I got nothing. I don't like the combat system. I don't like how initiative is determined. I think it's cool and different. I don't like it. The whole sort of declaring thing, it bothers me. There's so many other things that just rubbed me raw. And if it weren't for the enjoyment of the game, I definitely would have quit this. Which is, as I warned you all, a possibility that I would, at any moment I could just say, you know what, I'm done with this system. And to that extent, all the credit in that affair ends up going to you four. I had no idea. I removed expectation whenever I polled my viewership and asked for 4 volunteers who were somewhat familiar with Vampire the Masquerade to be a part of this game. And other than Aaron and Jordan, you guys, none of you knew each other. Each of you came with varying amounts of experience, not just into the VtM system, but the tabletop role-playing as a whole. And not just a tabletop role-playing, but to such drama-heavy, character-driven, non-combat slog of constantly, what the fuck do I do? What opportunity costs do I ignore? What do I do? And you all meshed together so well in that. Of course we struggled as we tried to find our way together as a group that had never really worked together as tabletopping before, to try to find our characters and to try to find our own way to have fun together and make an impact. But you all 4 did that. And you did it well. You did it so well that for the past few sessions, I just sat back and let you guys run with it. And it was so character-driven that we didn't need to play with the sandbox that, like all these various characters that I made. As I described at the end of last session, ultimately the story isn't about who becomes prince. It's about having fun. And you all were having fun through these developments. And rather than external conflict, you were having your own internalized conflict. And that's great. I don't shy away from that. That means you care so much about your characters and about the setting. You immerse yourself so deeply into that you're willing to go toe-to-toe with each other about it. And you all accepted that fact, that you were willing to go toe-to-toe with each other about it, and you were okay with it, and you made it work. As difficult as that is to separate in-game knowledge from metagame knowledge, you all tried your damnedest, and you did well with that. I have immensely enjoyed these sessions, even though the system itself I found immensely lacking and wanting, and I do not regret doing this, but I do not see myself ever doing another tabletop role-playing game of VtM. To that extent, you think you all brought your own individual strengths and weaknesses to the table, and I also thought you helped complement one another as the time went on. Of course, we have Aaron there, who's sort of driven to see his characters, fail in spectacular ways because it makes shit interesting. And how Jermaine ended up being proactive in a limited amount of time he had, which threw the coterie into a tailspin. We have Cripson there, who Byron is certainly an interesting piece of work himself, not, painted into a Ventru corner. His weaknesses weren't the clan ones that we ended up seeing, but his impatience and his unfamiliarity with the Camarilla and his newness to New York and his inability to fit in. We have Jordan, who played this sort of bon vivant who didn't have much of a care or sense of any sort of attachment to reality because he was too busy partying, but he still found his own ways to make an impact upon the story. We have Sean, who played a character who tried to compensate heavily for his weaknesses, who got rid out of Chapter 2 because of sanguinary animism, and, we just didn't wait a day because the other player characters didn't wait a day. But he added his own interesting flavor and spin to the story through caring about a little girl who had been horribly murdered and became a ghost. We're all shaky. I, of course, am shaky myself. I have my own strengths and weaknesses. I think I'm good at being a game master. I have great spontaneous thoughts. Spontaneity, creativity. I can come up with thoughts very easily. Sometimes I don't write those thoughts down. And sometimes I regret my decisions because I can't fucking remember them. And my weaknesses, I think my biggest weakness ended up being just a sense of lost. of not knowing what to do with the system and not developing an attachment to the system, where it just ended up being us rather than the system itself, which, is perfectly fine. The fact that fun ended up being the primary category, but I'd like to like the system too. That's going to end my sort of babbling on my extensive monologue. I wanted to get all of my thoughts in before you guys did yours to just, I don't know. I guess I'm the storyteller, so I need to set the scene, even out of character.